Hello everyone and welcome to the second round of the US Chess Championship. We skipped round 1 as it wasn't very eventful, so we're starting off with round 2, and we have a very nice game between Wesley and Dariusz Swiercz. As it says on their website, the 2021 US Championship is a 12-player round robin featuring the strongest players in the United States, and they compete for $194,000. And of course, the title of the US champion. If more players tie for first place, there will be a playoff, and the games last 90 minutes for the first 40 moves, and then you get additional 30 moves for the rest of the game. 30 seconds increment is being gained by every move you play, so when you hit the clock, and that's pretty much it. You are not allowed to offer a draw before move 30. So that being said, let's check it out, and then we're going to discuss the tournament a little bit, and of course the standings. Well, not standings, okay, we're going to show the standings after round 3, let's say. But it's a very nice game. It's a very short game, and it really shows how double-edged it can be to try and surprise a top-tier player in chess. So without further ado, let's check it out. Wesley, with the white pieces, opens with e4. We have c5 by Swiercz, going for the Sicilian defense, knight f3, d6, and now bishop to b5 check. Wesley goes for the canal attack. We have bishop to d7. Wesley trades. We have bishop captures, queen captures, and now c4. So grabbing more control in the center, the d5 square is now definitely in white's control. However, you relinquish the control of the d4 square, so if you're not careful, black might put a knight there. So this could be very annoying. So knight to f6, knight to c3, and both players develop all of their knights. We have d4 striking in the center. And now usually black just captures on d4, but here Swiercz goes for a very rare continuation, and that is queen to g4. And here white has really a lot to consider. C captures on d4 seems like a good option, knight captures on e4 seems like a good option, queen captures on g2 seems like a good option, and more often than not white just castles here, because if you go for the e4 pawn, that's not going to end well for you. For example, if knight captures on e4, we're going to play knight captures, queen captures, and then d5, and you have problems here. Queen to a4 check is coming, and this will be very unpleasant. You don't have to move the king. You could play some like knight e5, queen a4 check, knight d7, but rook e1, and that black king will be there for a very long time, and you kind of don't want to castle queenside. White could very easily just destroy this and start an attack against the black king. So in the hands of someone like Wesley, this position is very much winning for white. So instead, after this queen to g4 move, Wesley doesn't castle. This line that we've shown is not forced, of course. I just wanted to show you why knight captures on e4 can be played, but he goes for d5. And now what do you play here? Okay, knight to d4. Now we did put a knight here, as we said. Knight captures on d4. We have a queen trade. Queen captures on d1. Wesley recaptures with the knight. You don't have to worry about this pawn because black has to waste a tempo recapturing the piece. So knight captures on d1, c captures on d4, and now f3, nicely strengthening the center here. The e4 pawn is now nicely defended, and there are a few games where e5 was played, but here Swiercz goes for rook to c8, attacking the c4 pawn, and it is now only as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Wesley continues. He defends the pawn, b3, and now he has a beautiful pawn chain here, but like all things that are beautiful, it can easily be destroyed, and at some point we might expect something like a6, b5, or the knight moves, and then we're going to play f5, so the pawn chain will be challenged at some point. So first we have e5 now. Black already has a passed pawn, so this could be very dangerous, and it doesn't really do anything if you capture en passant. Black will just recapture and then play e5, so the d4 pawn will be nicely defended. But Wesley just continues with the g4. He says, I control a lot of space, I want to control more space. So g5 is coming, then we're going to play maybe h4, and black will have to figure out how to develop his pieces, because the bishop here is not really a great bishop. As they say, if you have all of your pawns on dark squares, well, not all of them, but most of them, you do not want to have a dark square bishop. You want to have a light square bishop. Or if you have a dark square bishop, you want to put your pawns on light squares. So here we have bishop to e7, and now king to e2. Wesley doesn't need to castle. The queens are off the board. There really isn't any danger, so it makes sense to have an active central king. And now Swiercz goes for h5. He would very much enjoy opening up the h file for his rook, but Wesley says, I was going to push g5 anyway, so let's just do it. g5 pushes back the knight, knight to d7, and now bishop to d2. You don't have to play h4 right away. The bishop is defending the pawn here, so you might as well wait with the push of the pawn, because pawns are the only pieces that can't really go back. So once you push them, they're just there. So here we have castles by Swiercz, now preparing maybe a move like f6 or f5, trying to open up the f file for the rook, and knight to f2. Wesley wants to bring the knight to d3. There he will have support for f4, but also he will have very nice support for c5 if he ever needs it in the future. So here we have a6, black is preparing b5, and now knight to d3. So for the moment you can't really go for b5 right away. It seems like something you really want to do, because we discussed how you want to challenge this beautiful pawn chain that Wesley has. The problem is, after captures and captures, white just plays a4, and the white is the one who will create a pass pawn. The material on the board is completely equal, but with black having double the d pawns, it's white who's kind of up a pawn. It's a 2-to-1 advantage on the queen side, and this is very important in positions like this. So after knight to d3, we have f5. Of course, the black wants to challenge white center and open up the f file for the rook, but now Wesley can just capture with the g pawn. So g captures on f6 en passant, g captures on f6. Well, black also improves his position in the center, and rook h to g1 check. You could also bring this rook to g1, but this pawn, this rook really doesn't have all that much to do here. So rook to g1 check, king to h7, and now rook to g3. Now Wesley is ready to double up on the g file, and here you really don't have all that many options. Your bishop isn't doing all that much. The knight really also doesn't have all that many squares. If you play knight c5 and trade off the knights, then you've traded off your only active piece. You're gonna be left with a bishop who's stuck behind the pawns that are on dark squares. So here you should play something like rook to g8, and after, let's say, rook 8 to g1, we could see a trade, captures. White would improve his pawn chain, f4 would be coming, but you know, black is playing this. But in the game, Swiercz tried h4, and this simply will not do for a very specific reason. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning move here for Wesley while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this incredible move. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is of course rook to g4. That's the good stuff, yes. And this isn't with the idea of winning a pawn, because black, of course, will play f5. That's the idea, and the pawn will be defended. But we want to make black waste a move, play f5, and this will give us just enough time to double up rooks on the g file. And then our rook can come to g7, hopefully, and look at this bishop and knight on this 7th rank. That's just easy food for the rook. We often say, like the good old Josh Waitzkin taught us, that the rook on the 7th rank is called a pig. So here we have f5. Black, of course, has to defend the h4 pawn. E captures on f5, rook captures, and now rook 8 to g1. Going for that rook to g7 check. So, of course, you have to defend. If you play rook f7, this defends this, but then bishop to b4 comes, puts pressure on the pawn. Then rook to g6 comes, and the white will have a very clear idea of how to continue playing this. So instead we have rook to e8. Now the bishop is nicely defended, but now knight to f2. Now the knight is coming here, and then the knight will put pressure on the d6 pawn and on black's position in general. So knight to f6, attacking Wesley's rook, and only now rook to g7 check. King h8, and now another brilliant move, rook to f7. Beautiful rook to g7 is now coming. We're gonna double up on the 7th rank. The knight cannot move as the rook would hang, so it's a really difficult position for black to handle. We have rook to h5. Now the knight can move, but now rook to g6. Every move Wesley plays here is just spectacular. Now the thread is very simple. We're going to capture the bishop. After rook captures, we're going to pick up the knight. So we're going to win 2 pieces for a rook. So knight to g8, and now comes knight to e4. So just mounting the pressure. Now the d6 pawn is hanging, so we have to do something about this. Rook to d8, defending the pawn, and now bishop to g5. You could also just play rook captures on g8. This is perfectly fine. We remove the defender of the bishop, and then we pick it up. But Wesley says there's no need to rush this. We can just play bishop to g5 first, put more pressure on white, and it doesn't matter what white plays. If bishop captures, knight captures, there's really no play left here for black. We're just going to play rook g7, rook h7, and deliver checkmate. Or if the knight moves, we can just capture the knight, so nothing really works here for black. So after bishop to g5, we have rook to h7, trying to relieve some pressure, try and get some rooks off the board. But here Wesley says, all right, now we don't really care. Rook captures on e7. And now what do you play? If knight captures on e7, then you simply play bishop to f6 check. The only move for black is to block with the rook. Now we pick this up with the rook, for example, and now all sorts of nasty discoveries are being threatened. We're already up a piece, but we're going to win a lot more. So after rook captures on e7, Swiercz plays rook captures on e7, but now Wesley plays the absolute best move in the position, and that is bishop captures on h4. There are other great moves here, of course. You could play anything and still win, but this is just nicely collecting a pawn and saying to black, you have no moves here whatsoever. So both of the rooks are hanging. There's nothing to play here. If you play something like rook here, trying to give up some material, we're just gonna capture it and then capture the d6 pawn. We're now up 2 pawns. Of course, the position is completely winning, and Swiercz knows that this would be completely hopeless to try and play this against Wesley. You don't have a way of activating your knight. The rook has really nothing to do here, and white already has a passed d pawn, so it would be hard even without being up 2 pawns, but being up 2 pawns, it's impossible. So after bishop captures on h4, Swiercz resigned, and a very nice victory for Wesley, so who is currently tied for first place after 2 rounds have been played. So only 32 moves, and here you can see just how dangerous it is to try something like this. So it was definitely a prepared line. Like we said, rook to c8 was a new move, so Swiercz prepared very well, and then everything up until the point where he played h4 was still maybe tenable, but after h4, Wesley just played the absolute best possibility on every move, and that was more than enough. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Wesley showing us how to punish even the slightest of inaccuracies. I would like to thank Nima Mohseni, Idil Gumruk, Meka Kennedy, Tom Deralo, and Robert Kiefer for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, continuing the coverage of the US Chess Championship and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.